there's another guy at the top here that has obviously become the biggest injury lightning rod, I would say, in the NBA at this point, in terms of what you think his value is long-term. So that's a good 5-minute spiel on what our plan is. I'm going to give you the floor to take number one, unless you want me to do it. Like I'm okay either way.
No, I mean, I think the other thing we do have to consider is I think we have to do a little bit of kind of adjusting for what was knowable at the time. I think if you were really going to say who's going to have the better career from here between Zion and Ja, I think you probably have to lean Ja.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, frankly, we don't know if Zion's ever going to be on the court again. Like it's early morning for you. And if you saw the news that came out today, it came up an hour ago. Yeah. He is, continuing to lightly rehab. It's not great for a guy to have played basically half a season in his first 3 years. And it's not like an Embiid situation where he has an injury and just sits out. It's like he tries to play and then thing goes wrong, has surgery, tries to come back and fails.
Like the Zion's frame in general is just like not something that seems human given the level of explosiveness that emanates from that frame.
Right.
And by the way, like we could say something similar about the guy that I think both you and I are going to like take at number one at this point. Ja Morant, like his body mechanics are unnatural in a very strange way, just in regard to like my heart drops every time that he leaps in traffic. Like I get terrified every time Ja Morant goes up.
You don't like the one leg straight-legged landing?
Right. Like I'm terrified. So there's some of that to this too. Like I don't know, man, but go ahead.
If we're sort of going back in time and having what's happened so far to sort of evaluate with, I still kind of think you take Zion first. Like, I think that he's kind of, especially as you say,
let's jump in. Let's just do it then.
Yeah.
So
no, I still think
number one overall pick, Seth Partnow, you go.
I still think you take Zion first, just because, you've seen that he's a destroyer of worlds when he actually plays. And, I don't know if we can say, well, run his career 10 times, but I think if the median injury outcome is going to be better than the actual has been. I think, I feel as played, it's not good, but this is almost getting back to like Odin and Durant, right? Like Odin was really, really damn Zion has been better when he's played than Morant has been when he's played, which wasn't quite the case for Durant and Odin. But like when he played, Odin was good enough to easily justify a first overall selection. And I feel that way about Zion. And I just don't know if we can, completely accept all of the post injuries as givens,
So yeah, it's hard. On some level, like Zion has always struggled with picking up minor injuries. Like in his senior year of high school, he missed a month of his senior year due to, if I remember correctly, like a sprained knee of some sort. At Duke, he missed a little bit of time because his shoe literally exploded on the court. These little things have crept up over the years. Like this is not, I think that like he had some sort of like fracture on like a wrist or like a hand or something like that going back in high school. Like there have been these little things in the past to where nothing ever seemed chronic at the time, but it's one of those like confirmation bias things to where if you wanted to see that if you wanted to see Zion Williamson's going to be an injury risk, the signs were there. Like he did consistently miss games throughout the course of his high school career, but none of it was ever chronic enough to where you believe like, okay, New Orleans, they just hired like Aaron Nelson from the Phoenix Suns to run their like performance department, and you think that he gets with a strength and conditioning and diet program, like it's all going to be fine. Like there were a number of things that would make you believe that Zion would be fine. There are a number of signs that would make you believe that Zion was not going to be fine. I think at the end of the day, though, like Zion's really incredibly good, and it's impossible to overstate how good he was as a 20-year-old last year. He was so fucking good.
Yeah.
Like he averaged 27 points and like 8 rebounds and was the best force going toward the basket in the NBA. He's like one of the only players in the league that can be a legitimate true post-up threat because he's so quick and so dominant. Like Zion Williamson breaks my brain when he's on a basketball court, like consistently.
I think without hyperbole, I think you could make a case that Zion is the most, like when he's been on the floor, it's the most destructive rim attacking force the NBA has seen since Wilt Chamberlain. You can make that.
Yeah.
It's the graph that I've tweeted out a number of times. If you look at the like restricted area attempts per 100 possessions, he is about, the guys who for their career are kind of the elites are around 12. He's up around 20.
Yeah, it's insane.
And that's taking into account both the shot attempts and getting fouled. So, just it's and that includes, by the way, some pretty good Shaq seasons, and we don't have full data for all of Shaq's career, but based on kind of free throw rates and other stuff like that, like I think we have a pretty good sense of where Shaq would have been, and Zion is still like shooting 40, like getting to the rim 40% is more often than Shaq would have.
It's fucking crazy. It's absolutely nuts.
And to add to that, I think, especially picking at the top of the draft, what are you aiming for? You're aiming for eliteness, right? You're not aiming for, so 60 games of elite is substantially better for those purposes than 82 games of almost but not quite elite, to my thinking.
Yeah.
So like you're talking about, okay, he's gonna, it's the Joel Embiid thing. He's gonna miss 20 games. Is he on the floor in the playoffs? If he is, great. That's what we need. We don't care if he misses back-to-backs in January. Who cares? So I think that is as good as Ja has been. And frankly, since we've talked about doing this pod over the last 10 days or so, it's like it's almost like he knew we were discussing this. It's like, don't forget. And he's been just absurd for the last week and a half. So it gives me a little bit of pause, but I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment.
It's 100% right. Having said that, so I'm up at number 2 here.
Yeah. RJ Barrett. No. Okay.
I'm not taking RJ Barrett. I'm taking Ja Morant. I would take Ja Morant at number 1 at this point. And this comes as someone who has been as steadfast and strong up until like the last month or so that Zion is the guy that I would still take in 2019. I think he's unbelievable. I think that the elite level that Zion has reached is just so much better than anything we've seen from Ja so far. The last month and a half, the leap is real. Like the big thing with me with Ja was you kind of saw it in some playoff moments that the Grizzlies have played over the last year, 2 years, like big games late in the season and everything. When teams started to game plan against him, that teams would essentially just go under screens, and he was not a consistent enough shooter to where he could beat those like defensive structures regularly. He couldn't necessarily create his own jump shot efficiently enough to be a real end of game threat that I think would make some game winners, but wouldn't be able to do it consistently enough to be able to lead the Grizzlies to a title or something like that, right? So far this year, Ja Morant is averaging 25 points a game, shooting 49% from the field and 40% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. Not a crazy volume from 3. Most of those 4 attempts per game are pull-ups. He's making just enough of them to keep defenders honest now, to where I think that over the course of the next few years, I actually think Ja Morant is going to be a legitimate end of game closer that the Grizzlies can count on. And to me, with that being the case, look, Zion and Ja are both like defensive nightmares right now. Like we can just call that out. Like they're both really bad on that end. So this conversation, I think we just like throw out the defensive side. Do you agree?
Well, I will say again, this is contradicting picking Zion once. Like, I feel like you can get away with especially with the willingness of teams to play kind of a second point guardish guy to be if you paired him with a Caruso or a Beverly or someone of that ilk, and Tyus Jones is this a little bit on smaller guards at least, then you can mitigate sort of bad your lead guard being a bad defender in a way that your guy who is probably best as a 5, you can't.
Yeah, like I would also make the case though that like if Zion figures it out on defense in terms of like conditioning and rotations, like his upside is much higher. I would also say that in the playoffs, teams are just going to hunt Ja to some extent, right? Like they're just going to try and get him switched on. If you're playing Kawhi Leonard whenever they play the Clippers in the playoffs, right? Like the Clippers are just going to hunt these screening actions to get Paul George and Kawhi Leonard matched up on Ja Morant. Right,
you're
that's
already
going to happen.
I'm pre-annoyed for the soft switching we're going to see in the playoffs already. I'm just
it's going to happen. Like
they're running a ball screen that is like 30 feet from the basket, going parallel to the basket. Why do you need to switch? Don't just fight through and anyway. That's something for Mo and I to bitch about continuously on Nerder. But
so I guess that what I would say is like they both give back stuff defensively to the point where like I don't even know that it's worth diving into the defense when making this pick. I think it's purely about like who do you think is going to be the guy that you can trust offensively when he's on the court. I would take Zion. I would. Like, I think that I would trust Zion at the end. Like, maybe not at the end of the game. I might rather have Ja Morant, like, create a shot at the end of games now. But for the course of 38 minutes or whatever he's going to play in the playoffs, I think I'd rather have Zion Williamson because I think that the pressure he puts on the rim is better. I can't trust Zion to stay healthy. I can't do it. Like, I feel bad about it. And I think that Ja has closed the difference in terms of what they look like when they are elite and when they are at their best, to where I'm willing to make that trade-off now. Like, I'm willing to say, okay, Ja Morant has been the 4th best guard in the NBA this year. Something like that, the 3rd best guard. Like in that ballpark. Like Trae Young has actually been like sneaky incredible this year. Even though the Hawks have not been very good. Like he's been phenomenal across the board. Obviously, Stephen Curry, I think, is number 1. But all the other MVP candidates are bigs right now, like Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic. I mean, maybe DeMar DeRozan, I think, would stand out like as a guard, but he's not really the kind of guy we're talking about in this conversation, I think.
This is probably, I mean, it's worth pointing out that like since getting off to a rough start, James Harden has been really good for the last 6 weeks or so. But yeah, it's sort of he's like, this is something that happens as a guy gets off to a bad start of a season and everyone sort of forgets about him, or someone gets off to a good start of the season and he just is sort of assumed to be that guy for the rest of the year. But we'll talk about that.
Harden, Harden played himself into shape.
Yeah,
like Harden was like out of shape to start the year, and now he's back to being James Harden. Yeah. Which is really good.
Yeah.
I mean, like, look, put it this way. There's no way you can say that over the course of the full season, accounting for everything, James Harden has been a more effective player than Ja Morant.
I think that's right. Yeah. I think you're right.
I mean, like, I would take Ja over both of the Utah guys. I would take Ja over Chris Paul right now, I think, like in terms of just effectiveness this year. Not to say Chris has been bad, but like Chris is another all NBA guy, and I think I would take Ja Morant over Chris Paul right now.
Is Ja Morant getting Bismack Biyombo to double-doubles?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And
that's a real good point.
Before the Raptors fans yell at me again, I know that Kyle Lowry did it too 6 years ago, but that wasn't like wasn't Bismack Biyombo signed off the street. That was like recent lottery pick Bismack Biyombo. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
But Chris Paul, the thing with Chris Paul this year is that the shooting has not been quite as elite as what it's been in the past. He's still a much better defender than John Morant is. So there are trade-offs. Like, I think that's the class of player, though, that Morant is playing in right now. I would not say that he's like a top 5 MVP candidate, but if I went to 10, I don't think I could get to 10 before I got to Ja.
I mean, the way I would put it is, I like to think of the league in tiers, and like, as of right now, I'm going to have to think long and hard about whether like Ja goes in tier 2 next year. If like the season ended, I would have to, and that's like a top 15, top 20 type player. I'd have to think long and hard about that. Like, that's on the level of like the sort of the Paul George, Jimmy Butler, like Chris Paul level of guys. And like, that's just, it's one of those honored to be nominated kind of things. Just even that he's played well enough to even be in that piece of the discussion.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to me, I would rather have the guy that I feel very good at some point in the next 3 years is going to be a top 10 player in the league.
Yeah.
I've seen enough to where I'm like willing to say that he's going to be that over Zion Williamson, who has struggled to play.
No, I think that we don't really differ in our opinions. Just sort of how much hindsight we're sort of allowing into like how much perfect hindsight we're allowing going to transport ourselves back to the draft. So and frankly, like